Okay, blessings and welcome everyone again. So today's topic, we're going to dive into this conversation of the intersection between your gut health and anxiety specifically. So we're going to unpack some of the Ayurvedic language around understanding, here we are in the Northern Hemisphere, we're entering into spring, depending on what place of the world you are in and at what altitude you're experiencing the current season that you're in right now. But for those of us who are in late winter about to enter spring, it's a very important conversation to start having. Is there's a big seasonal transition, and there are some seasonal implications that tie into the experience of anxiety in our nervous system. And then there are also very real physiological mechanisms that are happening in your digestive system and in what we call in Ayurveda your Agni, which is your digestive fire. And this, as we will explore today, this Agni is not only about the digestion, absorption, assimilation of nutrients, and cleansing is also not only about the foods that you eat and the things that you take in by mouth, but your Agni is actually responsible. There's a tie-in here to your nervous system and to your mental emotional fluctuations, your moods, and there's also these seasonal implications. So we're going to explore all of these topics today, and I want to give you some of the keys to unlock that. So as it comes to, this general topic of these workshops being primarily geared towards Ayurvedic psychology and the healing of trauma or releasing past imprints that are impacting our belief systems negatively and therefore creating various complexes of chronic health or pain situations. This is all tied in, and it's seasonally appropriate to explore what can we do to support the mind and the emotions and the regulation of the nervous system through understanding some of the gut connection, not from a super heady scientific place, but from which is fine too, but from a really earth-based, natural, wise lens that Ayurveda provides for us. This foundational science and wisdom that is really the building blocks of the fabric of our human existence. And really Ayurveda's aim is, its domain is health, but its higher purpose is to bring you to something higher than health. And so therefore that energy in whatever way that you connect to the divine is also a huge piece in terms of your ability to be experiencing the most whole, vibrant, thriving foundation of your human experience, so that you can also advance spiritually and also be who you came here to be and experience yourself as a whole, complete, unique, creative entity that is contributing to the whole of life. So your existence matters. And our topic today has, yes, it's about kind of realigning around and fixing some problems, so to speak, on the lowest level. But on the highest level, it's about something much bigger than that. And I would be doing Ayurveda in injustice and you an injustice to not at least speak to that as we enter into this conversation. So let's just check in, and I want to give you first and foremost a little overview of the connection between the gut, the Agni, which is the digestive fire, and we'll put digestion in air quotes because we said there's a physical, a mental, emotional, and an energetic, physical and energetic digestion that's happening, and the state of the gut and your emotional experience. So through the lens of Ayurveda. And then, so I want to lay that kind of groundwork for you. And then from that conceptual actual platform. We'll then dive into seasonal implications, and then we'll also then dive into, well, what are appropriate cleanse measures that we can take for the gut that's not going to throw my nervous system out of whack, or that's appropriate for my unique gut type. So actually, just a few days ago, I taught a full class, a whole 90-minute class that was specifically on gut healing, gut cleansing, and I geared it a little bit towards weight loss because that's appropriate for the spring. And I'll talk about the seasonal implications, but this class dives totally into your own self reflection on what's your gut, what's your body type, and what's your digestive type, and what are the cleanses that are most appropriate for your body type. So if you are watching this as a recording, or if you're watching here live, you can always visit my YouTube channel. And the last video, I think I called it Ayurvedic Cleansing and Weight Loss or something, live workshop. So that will dive really deep into helping you self-reflect on what's your body type. So today we won't go into what's your body type, but we will talk about some nuances of cleansing and reflect, and so that you can reflect. But we'll go a little bit more, we'll take more of the angle of Vata and the nervous system and the regulation of emotion and mood, and how that specifically relates to anxiety, because today's more about anxiety. Okay, makes sense? Sounds good. All right. Oh, I'm so happy to see all of your faces. So let's dive in. So starting with the foundation itself. Now, your Agni, so your digestive fire, as we'll call it, digestive fire, is digesting lots of things, actually. So this digestive fire has a commander, and then it has all of its disciples in the body. Like there's like the leader, and then there's all the ones that follow the leader, so to speak. So your Agni, or your digestive fire, is spoken of in Ayurveda as Jatara Agni, which means the central fire that's the leader of all the other fires. And that central fire is in your stomach or in your gut. And this Jatara Agni is essential because it's like the central flame, which all of the other little sparks of flames come from and follow. So in your body, you have this central Jatara Agni. Then we have secondarily, or in conjunction with, another Agni, or another fire. Agni is the name of fire. So our English language is very limited in how we understand these beautiful, deep, rich Sanskrit words. And I'm no Sanskrit scholar, but I at least know that I'm limited in my understanding of these concepts. So as I try to translate for you, I just invite you to allow your mind to think bigger about these concepts and not get stuck in the limitations of even the English language. So there are things in Ayurveda, or words in Sanskrit, that we call non-translatables. So Agni is one of those words. Agni is actually a non-translatable. It's a Sanskrit non-translatable. Sure, Agni is one of the names of God. Agni is the god of fire. Agni is fire. Agni is so many more things than fire. And Agni is in our cells. It's the intelligence. It's the brilliance. It's the intelligence. It's the radiance of life. It's the sun. It's part of the sun, right? It is the source of radiance and life in the entire universe or multiverse. So there are, it's really a non-translatable. But so I will use the word Agni to help you associate to a new word, versus just dumbing it down to mean your digestive fire, because it's not just your digestive fire, it's much more than that. So, and yet Agni has an essential role. It's the fire of life that's keeping you alive, that's keeping your consciousness in your body. And so your Agni is a center of intelligence, it's a center of awareness. When you bring light into a dark room, that Agni is illuminating everything that's there that you couldn't see before. It's allowing the ability to be aware, to be self-aware, is connected to your Agni. Your Agni is the source of your energy. So you think about fire. Like fire, when you put a pot on your stove onto fire, it's literally infusing energy into that vessel that is transforming the things that you put in the vessel into something very unlike what it was before, right? You put raw rice, you eat raw rice, it's digested, it's very different than cooked rice, right? So like that fire is transforming it, it is infusing it with energy, and then you put that cooked rice into your body and it transforms into something that is no longer rice. It's absolute magic. Right? Have you ever just like sat at a bonfire and watched fire dance on wood? Like, it's incredible. We take it for granted. We take this concept of fire for granted. But when you watch fire dance on wood and really meditate on it, or a wood burning stove, or anywhere where you're just like actually watching it transform, it's both tangible and intangible. It has these qualities and this energy that radiates off of it. But you watch this piece of wood go from one form, disintegrate into ash, and that transformation is brilliant. it's magical. If all we did in this class was nothing else but talk about the brilliance and of fire, we could sing a million poems. So it's a very, very special element of nature that can't be translated or simply reduced down to science or to some dry concept. It is alive. What was it that happened? What did you experience the whole time that wood was transforming from wood to ash? It wasn't about this new product, ash. It was about the energy that it emanated during the process of transformation. The Agni in your body does that. It is responsible 100% for the energy production of your body and the intellectual capabilities of your mind, your self-awareness, your ability to self-reflect. You are using your Agni right now to digest the words that are coming out of my mouth. You are using, if those of you who are watching this as a video, you are using an Agni in your eyeballs that is taking light images of Agni, of light, in and digesting them and interpreting them through the Agni of your mind, which is a Sadhaka Agni, or Sadhaka Pitta. It's Sadhaka Agni. It's your intellectual ability. It's the part of your Agni that is digesting the things that you're seeing. Then there's an Agni that you are taking in these sounds that I'm making, and digesting them into words and abstract concepts that you're then thinking about. And that is a type of digestion. That's an Agni. It's an Agni. And if you've ever heard, like, your digestion in this case is connected to a specific language. You're hearing me speak in the English language. So your digestion of the sounds that I'm making is drawing upon the memory banks to help you make sense of what I'm saying. If I were speaking in a language or in a tongue that you didn't know, the sounds wouldn't be digested for you. You would be hearing sound, but they would be having a different effect on you, right? You wouldn't be digesting them in the same way. So this is all part of your digestion. And if your current experience in your body is low energy, fatigue, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, confusion, grief, pain, emotional pain or physical pain, it's all showing us that there's something in that central fire that's not transforming, digesting, absorbing, assimilating something about your experience in life. And and the things that it's digesting aren't only physical food. You're digesting, like I said, everything that you see and hear, also everything that you smell, taste, touch. All of it is digesting information. And this is all part of Agni. So our energy levels are all part of Agni. The system gets overloaded when it doesn't have enough fire, enough digestive fire, enough a bright enough, a strong enough Agni to fully break down, digest, transform, and absorb nutrients or substances or experiences into the wholeness that is you. So you're digesting everything that you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. You're digesting everything that flickers through your mind in the forms of thought waves, memories, real or fake conversations with other people in your mind, regrets, conflicts, past memories, whether they be positive or negative, any situation, present or past, your digesting through your Agni. If there are unmetabolized memories from the past, whether that you remember visually, consciously, or subconsciously, or unconsciously, or somatically in your body that haven't been digested, these are all going to impact Agni and decrease Agni, leading to feelings of anxiousness, overwhelm, other types of mood disturbances and fluctuations, especially even hormonally and everything. It all contributes. So even the hormonal balance of the body, the neurotransmitter balance in your body, it's all governed by this central concept, this central fire of Agni. This is my hand shape for the fire, for a flame. If you see me, I keep making this hand shape. Is this making sense at all? Is this landing a little bit? Okay. Okay, so that's a little bit of the metaphysics or some of the energetics, right? But now the role of the physical digestion and the physical gut, it also plays in. because physically and physiologically, the colon especially is directly connected to the nervous system. So I'll say that once more. The colon, obviously, your whole digestive tract is connected to your nervous system because other parts of your digestive tract also absorb nutrients, and that affects your blood sugar, and your blood sugar directly affects your nervous system. But the colon specifically is the primary site of what we call vata in Ayurveda. Vata, pitta, and kapha are the three primary doshas that are also Sanskrit non-translatables. They are big, beautiful concepts for the ways that the elements of nature, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, how they work in the body, how they function in the physiology. And there's lots of ways we can look at dosha. And again, the class from a few days ago, last week, we also dove in very deeply into that. But for now, we want to focus in a little bit on vata, because vata is the physiological principle of wind in the body. So in a healthy amount, your vata, everyone has all of these elements. They're just in different ratios, which is what makes up your unique body constitution. So people have more relation to fire and water and earth. Now, as well is a vata process. So vata being wind is about movement, and vata being wind, air, it's about the sea that or autumn time is the most vata as the adjective. It's the most vata season, and that's because so the winds come and blow the leaves off the trees, right? So that's like just like one little image you can keep in your mind. Vata is wind, and it's depleting, like the leaves falling off the trees. And so all change and all wind is actually vata in nature. But when the wind is excessive, that's when we start to have generation, emaciation down in the body. It can that is too much. Now our cells aren't getting the nutrients we need. Emaciation or the degradation of our tissues can happen even if we're a vata or a pitta or kapha person. So even if we're overweight, even if we're feeling like heavy and sluggish, some people think, oh, I must have too much kapha. But it's really a vata problem because there's cellular malnutrition happening at its core. And so the tissues are actually starving. And you might have excesses of things that didn't make it away body. So so coming back to vata change seasons. So vata, as we age, vata wind is movement and change. So the only thing constant in life is change, right? Every day the sun rises and sets, the moon rises and sets. The seasons are always changing. Everything's always changing. There actually is no stability in the material world because everything is always changing. People are being born and people are dying, and we are going through our lives, and we are inevitably in our physical form. We are every day moving closer and closer to death, which is a vatic thing because vata is depleting. So as the aging process goes on in our body, the body, no matter what body type you are, becomes more and more and more vata. Now, for people who are vata predominant in their body type, they will notice this change as they age more and more and more. So that's like vata in the joints, where we get cracky, poppy joints, and we tend towards dry joints or stiff joints in the body, and like, hard muscles that get really, really tense and kind of seized up. And it can lead to osteoarthritis because this is all vata in the joints. But because today we're talking about anxiety in the nervous system, and the seat of vata, where it lives in its normal healthy amount in your GI tract, is in your colon. So um, so vata, when it's in excess in the colon, and when it's in excess in the nervous system, and it's when it's in excess in the body, and it is increasing as we age, that's a recipe for increasing anxiety, because vata is dry, rough, cold. It's depleting, it's stripping away, it's catabolic, it's reducing. So it literally leaves us feeling more and more vulnerable, less and less stable in the world, less and less. We start to have memory issues because there's no water in earth for our mind to grasp onto. We don't have the storage in our body. So that feeling of vulnerability, like you're floating, literally floating out in the wind, where it just feels unknown and scary and exposed. That's all the physiological manifestation of vata in the body, vata in your physiology. And in a lot of ways, we can just reduce it down to that. The elements in your body are in excess, so we need to do things to bring them back down. So we talked about last week the pairs of therapeutic opposites, and how to counter all of the things I just said with more grounding, nourishing, oily, warm, all of these therapeutic opposites that help balance. But let's tie it back to the colon, because most people don't know the connection between this organ in your body and anxiety. Because in Ayurveda, as Ayurvedic practitioners, when we go to school for Ayurveda and we learn like all these therapeutic treatments, we are taught, well, first of all, 80% of diseases all have the foundation in vata imbalance. 80% of diseases are vata, are caused by vata. And 100% of all pain that we feel is caused by vata imbalance. It's not that vata is bad, it's just there's a healthy amount, and then when our body has more than the healthy amount, it's excessive. So it starts tearing down tissues in the body and breaking things down, leaving our nervous system feeling this exposed, dry, rough, vulnerable state. But it can also happen when this organ is not functioning well and eliminating properly. So one of the things that happens with vata and anxiety is that, just simply put, if someone's colon is backed up, they're going to have undue anxiety. So if you have normal, stable bowel movements, the second you wake up every morning, everything just glides right through, perfect banana, as Ayurveda people call it, a perfect banana released out of the bowels, and then your mind feels clear, your gut is now empty and ready to take in food for the day. That's like optimal. That's Sama Agni. That's a balanced Agni, or Sama Koshta, which is balanced elimination. So that means things are harmonious, they're happening. If you're a person that has tended towards normalcy in that arena of your health, then anytime you're off, you know it. For example, if you go travel and you take a flight somewhere, or you get super dehydrated, or you eat a bunch of really, dry, clogging foods, and then you're not able to go to the bathroom like you normally are, you're having a bad day. Like, right? Like, your mind isn't clear. You don't have the zest for life like you usually do, because your Agni, that radiant fire that is the source of your vitality and enthusiasm and mental clarity, is now bogged down because the GI tract is simply backed up. When the GI tract is backed up, the Agni fire goes down, the Jatara Agni goes down. So the whole system becomes sluggish. And then what happens? All the muscles and joints become sluggish, and the brain fog comes in, and you feel tired. There's just a direct correlation. But now, if you're not someone who's experienced just normal, healthy Sama Koshta or Sama Agni, balanced bowel movements every day, balanced digestion, then, and you've erred on the side of either really Vatic Koshta or Krura Koshta, which means really dry elimination, or really soft elimination where things just go right through you and liquefy. If you have either one of those, then you end up getting a lot of increased vata in your system, which can lead to that anxiousness, that unsettled feeling of undernourishment. And so let's just talk about the dry side of that for a moment. So the Krura Koshta, the dry elimination, when the colon is clogged or backed up, or people have been eating the wrong diet for decades, years, even just days, you'll feel it, days, weeks, months, eating the wrong diet for you in the wrong season, the wrong diet for your body type, eating when you're not hungry, where you don't actually have the Agni to digest food. So if you eat when you're not hungry, so if you eat if you're emotional, or you eat because you have anxiety and you want the taste of something to help you feel grounded and calm, but you don't actually have the digestive fire, the Agni, meaning the digestive enzymes, acids, and everything that's needed to break that food down and derive energy from it, because the system's clogged, backed up, or whatever, then you actually have more anxiety. So there's like a momentary soothing, which is temporary. But then what happens is the after effect is more clogging, more backed up, less and less ability to digest food, to then digest experiences, let alone digest emotions or have a clear mind. Everything gets backed up, you see. All of the thoughts in the mind you can't digest clearly. You start having your thoughts spiral out, and you have really, really busy mind. All because the colon is clogged. It's like this. Here's one other analogy with Vata. It's like there's a block in the colon. So the energy, your prana should be able to move in and go all the way down to your toes. Literally from the tip of your head all the way down to your toes. It should be able to move seamlessly. And Apana Vayu, which is one of the movements of wind in your body, goes from the navel and the pubic area, originating there, and then it moves down and out. So this is what carries urine out, menses, defecation, and when a woman gives birth, this movement of down energy going down and out. And that's Apana Vayu. So when Apana Vayu is blocked, it's like putting a brick wall right across your pelvic area, like where your waistband would be for your pants. There's like a wall there. And then you like take a tennis ball and you throw it. And instead of going all the way in one direction, it bounces on the wall, bounces back, right? So that energy, which is Vayu in prana, Prana is the essence of wind, which is your life energy that's coming in. And we call it vata when it's in excess, because now it's become debilitating in the system. We need prana, we need that life circulation, that life energy to move through us, but we don't need the excess. When it's bouncing back, when it's unable to move smoothly through where it needs to go in your body, it bounces back and creates havoc. Think about all the tennis balls throwing at the wall, and now they're all bouncing back and like hitting you in the face. It's just like they're getting shot out of a cannon and they're going boom, 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 boom. I know it's kind of a silly analogy, but I hope you get the point. Basically, that's what's happening in your mind. So the tennis balls, the energy is trying to move down, but instead it's blocked at the colon and it's bouncing back up into the mind, which is why we feel so out of sorts. And then we actually burn out because it's completely overwhelming. It's completely overwhelming. But now you take that out over days, weeks, months, years, decades of someone's lifetime. It just builds and builds and builds to the point where that anxiety and anxiousness just becomes a new set point, where they don't even know what it feels like. They don't even have a reference point to what it actually feels like in their body to feel so calm, safe, chill, relaxed. And sure, there are many other layers to it. Like a lot of the work that I do is with women. A lot of the work that I do is with women's specific health issues that, in the pelvic region especially, or to all the female body. And a lot of the work that I do is helping with resolve childhood traumas. And there's multi-layered here. And some people could say, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg paradigm, right? It's like, well, did the vata get embedded in me in childhood, which then led me to have a dry colon, for example, and poor digestion? Yes. Or did the poor digestion and the backed up colon lead to the anxiety, the feelings of fear and, the nervous system being dysregulated all the time? Well, yes, both. Because in Ayurveda, there's cause and effect relationship with things, but there's never really one without the other. Like everything's always merged. So in Ayurveda, the body is crystallization of mind. The physical body is crystallization of mind, because there's no separation between the mind, the emotions, and the physical body. They're all one. So, you can only think your way through something for so long. At some point, you need to access the level of the body and really help the body feel safe. At some point, you need to, work through softening whatever blockages are in the digestive tract or in the colon specifically to support that release. And sometimes, especially when there are early childhood imprints, that holding and that retaining is also a fear mechanism, that no matter how perfect someone's diet is, or how much oil they eat, or how much roughage they eat, or whatnot, their body is still, the colon is just still so dry, because there's just so much embedded fear and anxiety in the system. And so all of this is to simply inform you, not to project upon you what your experience has been, and definitely not to guilt anyone, because sometimes that comes up. It's like, oh, once I learn this, it's like, oh my gosh, how many years I've been, experiencing this struggle. And just let go of any type of self guilt or shame that comes along in these conversations. Just let that just roll right over you, because now that you're learning a new way, like, you can just take a new approach. So let's talk about that new approach. I'm just taking a moment to check the chat, see if there's any questions. Winds can also bring moisture and rain. So why is Vata considered dry? Yes, so winds can bring rain and moisture. Why is Vata considered dry? So the rain and the moisture is kapha. The rain and the moisture is water. And the wind is what brings them, but the wind itself as its own element is not wet. It can carry water. So Vata is responsible for all the movement and circulation in the body. Is the only thing that can move your blood around, for example. So, but Vata is not your blood. Your heart's beating. That's Vata. The muscles contracting. It's pushing blood around. It is the principle of the movement itself, the circulation itself, but it's not the substance itself. The substance itself is water. Make sense? Okay, and then Anna, Vata is contraction, which is fear, anxiety, as compared to open-hearted release, moisture. Yeah, so just from like a purely Vata example, you can think of it this way. Like I always say, imagine how you would feel emotionally if you were standing at the edge of a cliff. So when I say edge of the cliff, it's just so you get this big expanse, because Vata is air or wind and space. So there's like an expansive big view. You can see very, very, very far. So you're on the edge of this prominence or this cliff, and you're high altitude and the wind's ripping, and you have not enough clothing on, or you have no clothes or very little clothing. So your skin is very exposed and it's dry and windy and just desert. So you think about, how would I feel emotionally if I'm in that situation? And that illustration exemplifies perfectly the connection between physiology and emotions, or physiology and felt experience, or psychology. It's nearly impossible to think straight when you are in that physical position, being bombarded by the Vata element, right? So in its core essence, when Vata is in excess, this is the experience that we have in our nervous system, and therefore the experience we have in our mind, very, very busy mind, and therefore the experience we have in the emotions, which is contraction. When we're contracted, there's fear, there's general, like in that illustration, do you feel like you're standing at the edge of the cliff like this, with all that dry, cold air, like just like so relaxed, or and open-hearted? Or are you like, give me my like sandpaper on my skin and my ears, and my eyes are dry and like my mouth is dry? Like it's basically a survival mode. So when Vata is really high in our system, it's an emotional experience of survival mode. We're contracting, we're protecting, we're hiding, right? And so that is just like absolutely and directly correlated to the Agni, to the ability to digest, to your emotional experience, and then it always ties back to the colon health. I hate to say it, but I need to speak this one point, because it's only in recent years, with my most recent mentor, that I'm really finally understanding this. And it's a myth in the Ayurveda world. And that is that there's a certain herb that you may have learned about called triphala. Triphala is 3 fruits. Phala is fruit, and tri means 3. So there's 3 fruits. These 3 fruits are used in cleansing, and they're used to help clean the colon. But they're very dry. So Vata body types are not supposed to use Triphala. It's not even best for Pitta. Really only Kapha body types should be using Triphala, and it's not that they should be taking it for a lifetime. There's a lot of misinformation out there that Triphala is safe to take for a lifetime. So if you've studied Ayurveda and you've heard of this herb, don't blindly start taking a bunch of herbs, because actually there are a lot of Vata people that have been taking Triphala for too long, and now their colon is unnecessarily dry as a result, and they need to actually reestablish the suppleness, the softness of the tissue in order for it to be able to do its job well and not have the overall anxiety happening in the body as a result of the colon connection. So that's just a side note, just because I know some of you who have studied Ayurveda already, and that just popped into my mind as important. Okay, just checking these questions once more. Harinam said, I was surprised that the heart was not more involved with disease. And Harinam, what do you mean by the heart? Do you mean the emotional heart or the physical heart? And a component of power in the body, since it's the real seat of the soul. I guess you're talking about the soul heart. I'm appreciating everything you're sharing very much and looking forward to solutions as well. Great. And then Anna asked, what is the gift and the grace within us that goes from fear, small-minded, to fearlessness, courageous, lovable? Yeah. Oh, and Anna also said, what is the alternative for Vatas instead of Triphala? Castor oil. And for Pittas, it's aloe vera gel. Sharon said, it was warm, dry air. If it was warm, dry air, I'd love it as long as it didn't have sand in it. If it was cold air, not so much. Totally. So the quintessential Vata air is a cold, dry, rough in its essence. So this is why I add in that element of like dusty sand, because it's rough and cold and dry. So yeah, because if it was warm, like a warm breeze, that's actually fine for Vata. That can be balancing. All right, Gloria asked, how do I know what I am? For that, you need to have, there's lots of quizzes out there, but most of them make people more confused than anything. So best to just have a one-on-one consult with a practitioner. Myself or my mentor, I could refer you. We could both help you with that in a consultation. And then also, if you listen to last week's class, I help you self-identify some of your tendencies. You might be able to identify yourself with starting to learn and understand that. Yeah, Sharon said, I love the air in the desert when it's warm. So most likely you have some more kapha in your system, because kapha people who have a lot of water in their system, they love the dry weather because it feels, there's an innate experience, or it feels balancing to them. Really, Vata people, they can't stand the dry weather and they love the warm, humid weather. So Vata, Pitta, and Kapha as primary constitutional types are very blanket, broad categories. There's usually one predominance, or usually sometimes and often a secondary predominance. And then there's about 7 different attributes underneath each of those that are more nuanced and refined in your understanding of, oh, I have these attributes from this one, I have these attributes from this one, and I have these from this one. And that's what uniquely makes up me as a refined, in my refined understanding of myself. Okay. Great. So So, Anna, I want to go back to your question, and then we want to dive into a little bit more of the approach, the solution oriented approach to, well, then what do I do with all this vata, and how do I reset the gut, and how do I cleanse properly without feeling more depleted? Because that's really the question that it comes down to with vata specifically, because vata is associated with depletion, cleansing, purification, and decreasing. So with vata, especially if there's like a gut reset that needs to happen, or a heaviness in the digestion fire, the Agni fire is very low, we do need to reset, but we need to do it in a more nourishing way. We need to do it in a way that's going to help deliver nutrients to the cells and the tissues of the body, which will actually help counter vata and help a vata person feel more grounded, because nutrients are getting to where they need to go, while simultaneously giving the gut a break, but not overwhelming the system. Like, for example, for vata health, you never want to do a very extreme fasting protocol, right? You would never do a water fast for vata. You would never do, most likely not even a juice fast. Although certain types of juice cleanses for shorter amounts of time could actually be really helpful for vata. So it all depends on the individual. So we'll talk about methods in just a minute. I just want to tie back, Anna, to your question. You asked, what is the gift and grace within us that goes from fear and small-mindedness to fearlessness, courageous, and lovable? So in that, such a beautiful inquiry. And that question is an inquiry that I would encourage you to keep asking, because that question itself is one that will take you on a spiritual path. Because the only source of true fearlessness and courageousness and all of that beauty is taking shelter of the only thing that's stable in existence, which is not the material world, which is the spiritual world, the eternal world. So that's my first direction or reflection on that question. That would be the first direction I would encourage you to go, is to keep asking that beautiful question. And then secondarily, we are in human bodies that are subject to these fluctuations and changes. And how can we start to experience more of the eternal and the divine stability here in our bodies now? That's part of our spiritual evolution and why we're in a body in the first place. So for that, this is the beautiful science of Ayurveda helps us approach that in an embodied or integrated way. And so that actually leads us into the next phase of our conversation, which is getting down to some of the nitty-gritty of the foods that we eat and the cleansing or gut resetting protocols that are appropriate for vata. Now, any dosha type, vata, pitta, and kapha, can all experience anxiety. No matter what, all of the doshas can experience anxiety, because we have all the dosha types, because we all have all three. And they all can experience a clogging in the system, especially if like a kapha person is overweight, a pitta person is overweight, a vata person is overweight. That's just showing that the Agni is low, or the Agni is dysregulated, and that there's excess that has built up in the system. There can be excess that builds up in the system with simultaneously nutrient deficiency. And so the therapeutic opposites that we talked about last week, this gets into the next level of refinement of them, actually, because as a quick review, the pairs of opposites are the yin and the yang. So the yin is in Ayurveda, we call it brunhana, not yin, but Chinese medicine would call it yin. So it's increasing, it's building, it's growing, it's nourishing, it's grounding. So it's increasing. Where yang, it's energy moving in, where yang is energy moving out, and it's cleansing and depleting and decreasing and diminishing. And that's in Ayurveda, we call that langana, cleansing, purifying, reducing, scraping, the excesses out of the bodily channels, out of the tissues, stuff that doesn't belong there. It's cleansing. So there are these two fundamental pairs of opposites that we use therapeutically to bring balance back into someone's system. But now we're talking about vata, which is already on the side of yang because it's cleansing, depleting, diminishing. But there's also excess in the body in the form of maybe weight gain or mucus. So there's a seasonal transition too, because in winter it's there's ice and snow in the mountains. Like everything gets cold, stuck, stagnant, and we kind of physiology hibernates a little bit more in the winter, just metaphorically speaking too. But then in spring, that all wants to move, which, since we're on this topic, I'll take a tangent. This is part of the seasonal implication of anxiety. We are, if you're going from winter to spring, you are inherently agitated, and you are having the physical experience of anxiety and agitation because something's about to change, something's about to move. You've been hibernating all winter and you've been like still and stuck in your body. Now all of that's getting ready to move. Like my partner and I joke, we're like the seed packets. We read this little poem last week. We're like the seed packets in our seed closet are shaking to jump. They want to jump out of the envelope and plant it in the ground. But it's not, the ground isn't quite ready. It's not quite warm enough yet. But that's the feeling in our body. We read that poem and we just started laughing because it was so beautiful and poetic, but it was also like, that's how we feel. It's agitating. And if we don't understand that energetic implication of the season, then we all start to think we're going a little crazy. We describe it as stir crazy, or we feel like anxious because we feel change, on the edge of change, but we don't know what the change is. So that's the unknown. That feels vulnerable. That feels exposed, right? So that's the seasonal implication. So there's like, just know that everyone in that seasonal transition is going through that, unrest and that anxiousness. And that change is just around the corner. That just means change is just around the corner. Everything's mobilizing to move. So back to the physiology and the therapeutic opposites is that so vata is already on the yang side, but part of that is that we have all these excesses that have built up seasonally or situationally because of wrong diet, wrong food, undigested food stuff, or just winter. Everything's like built up. So we do need to create an outlet for releasing that, but we need to do it in such a way that also nourishes. So that means using one side of, not just one or the other, in a very straightforward way of therapeutic opposites. That means we have to just get more artistic, more refined with how we enter into this reset, this dilation and opening and allowing for the system to release the excesses that it's built up. Because excess of vata needs to be released. Excess of anxiety needs to be released. Excess of wind and air and dryness and constriction needs to be released. All that excess needs to be released. So need to help it release. But also some of the reason why that excess is there is from cellular depletion. So, like, say, for example, if you're someone who has, maybe you have a little excess weight on your body, but you crave like proteins and you're constantly hungry and your blood sugar's always, spiking up or dropping down, and you feel like you need to eat very often, but you're like, but I'm trying to lose weight. I need to have like an extra 10 or 15 pounds. So I feel like I can't eat as much as I'm hungry for. There's actually different types of hunger. You start to learn at the levels, which level of your Agni you're feeling. There's a feeling when Jatara Agni has true hunger. That means Jatara Agni having true hunger means there's not only there's space in the GI tract to receive physical food, and there are digestive enzymes and acids available, being produced by your organs to break down that food, like the transformation of the log into ash, but to break it down fully and create a radiance of energy. There's a feeling. It's like a hollow, empty feeling in the stomach. There's a lightness in the mind. There's like a lightness in the body. And that's like a true hunger cue. But some people, when they say I'm hungry, they're getting a hunger cue that's not always a true hunger cue. So they're getting it from the tongue, from the desire to satiate a flavor or a texture that reminds them of something comforting that they have a tie to. Or it's the dosha that has been out of balance for so long speaking to them, and they think that it's hunger, but it's really, like an easy example would be like SIBO or Candida being like, I'm hungry. Or if you have some kind of gut parasite, the parasite is the one that's having the craving. And then you register that as like, I need to eat sugar. I need to eat cookies. I need to get pastries or muffins or whatever. So that's not a real hunger cue of your body, right? That's a hunger cue of another entity that's not your intelligence, your cellular intelligence. So when a dosha is in excess, it will take over your cravings. So this is when someone's eating like a standard American diet and they've eaten like all kinds of fried foods from fast food restaurants, for example. The dosha is in excess, or there's ama, which is a metabolic waste product in the body. Some people translate that to mean toxicity. Ama is another Sanskrit non-translatable, but it's a waste product. It's basically undigested food or excess dosha, but we call it a metabolic waste or toxins. And so when there's ama built up in the system, that person will crave more of the thing that puts them out of balance. So they'll be like, oh, follow my cravings or follow what sounds good to me. Okay, I'm going to go to the fast food restaurant. Or I really need to eat, this meat or this cheese or this wheat or these like other clogging foods that actually bring your energy way down. And so it's a false hunger cue because it's coming from an entity that's not yourself. We can extrapolate that all the way into like the metaphysical and the energetic aspect of our subpersonalities. So there are parts of us that were hurt in the past and if they want to take over our consciousness, say if we're meditation practitioners or spiritual practitioners, and you're really committed to your spiritual practice, your meditation, or you're really committed to your personal development and becoming a higher and better version of yourself, and you're committed to that, or you're committed to an egoless path of some sort, well, ego or that subpersonality or that hurt part of you really doesn't want to not be in control of your psyche anymore. So it will crave foods that allow it to stay in control, that allow it to live, that allow it to, that actually keep you in a state of consciousness that is not in alignment with your higher goals. And it's not to say this part of you is evil. This part of you is just trying to get its needs met. But this part of you does need to be healed and trained to not be the master of you, but to be the servant of you, your capital U, capital Y, you, your capital S self, your higher self. So once its needs are getting met from the higher self, it will no longer crave those things that throw it out of balance. But you just have to remember, take home message here is kind of whatever food you eat is what holds this, your state of consciousness. So whatever food you're eating and your motivation for eating it, conscious or unconscious, will hold your state of consciousness, will be your energetic template of existence. So if you eat something like really heavy, you're going to feel really heavy. If you eat something you can't digest, you're going to feel heavy and lethargic. Or this, we actually didn't have time to go into it today, so I'll do a separate training on it. But this goes into the energetics of foods. And we go into the whole mind category here, but there's subtle energetics with your foods that allow them to, that certain foods eaten in a certain way with certain intentions and all that, they create peacefulness and harmony in your mind. We call this sattva in Ayurveda, another non-translatable, which helps you connect to a higher consciousness in this more closer to the spiritual realms. Then there are foods that make the mind very agitated. We call these rajasic foods that make the mind very busy or connected to ambition and goals and sense gratification, but they agitate the mind. So there's many different lineages and schools of thought, even just on a meditation path. They say don't eat rajasic or tamasic, that's the third category, foods, because your mind will be disturbed. It will keep your mind very, very busy. And then there are certain foods that hold the consciousness of tamas, which is the mode of ignorance. It's the energetic of sleepwalking, essentially, where we're ignorant to our higher selves. We're ignorant to the things that have caused us pain in the past. We're just sleepwalking and unaware of our spiritual beingness. And so there are foods that dull our senses and that keep us in our blind spot, or that keep us feeling low and small and confined and restricted and easy to control by others, really. So understanding those categories of food, sattva, rajas, and tamas, or sattvic foods, rajasic foods, tamasic foods, are also part of the subtle energetics of food that allow your mind to align and your physiology to align with your goals, and allow mind and body to be in harmony with one another. Now, it's not just the food substances, but it's where they came from, who handled them, your consciousness while you're preparing the food, your consciousness while you're eating the food. It's all a meditation. So these are some advanced principles, but we'll bring it back to anxiety because there's very real effect here. And the most obvious example that I could give are for like animal products as a whole. You have to remember that when you're consuming an animal product, you're also consuming the consciousness of the creature and their sentience and their experience in life. So for people with anxiety, if or and when they're intaking animal products, especially of the animal flesh itself, they're also receiving the emotional experiences, the fear, namely the fear and the pain. So if we're trying to break free from the cycles of anxiety, overwhelm, and anxiousness, not only do those foods already dull the mind and clog the gut, which we already made our case for how that impacts anxiety, there's also this subtle energetic that needs to be considered. Now, Ayurveda, Gloria asked about what about seafood and eggs, and it's the same, Gloria. They're still disturbing to the mind, but there are varying degrees of. There are other more refined ways that we would look at the energetics, which we just don't have time to get into today with all the nuances. But they'll still be clogging in the system, and they will still create they will still contribute to anxiety and impurities from the very least. She asked about milk. So milk is actually the most sattvic animal product because it comes from the love of the animal. From its purest essence, it's known in that way. However, because of the industries today, it's not coming from the love of the animal. It's coming from the total disrespect, for lack of so much more that I could say, right? Like the destruction of nature. So that being said, we have cows here on our homestead, but they are milk cows, but they're not pregnant, so they don't give milk, and we don't drink milk. But I would imagine cows like that, it would be received very, very differently into your body if they're just completely loved up and adored and part of your family and taken care of. That's a different energetic, right? And I always feel a little bit nervous, talking kind of publicly around food choices, especially when it comes to these kind of divisive topics. That they can be divisive. I don't see them as divisive, because everything's on a spectrum. And even Ayurveda, just for your knowledge, Ayurveda looks at every possible food substance in existence and shows their therapeutic benefits. So the only time really animal products are used in Ayurveda is in very severe cases of emaciation to save someone's life. And then all the Ayurvedic texts break down the details of different types of animals and different types of animal products and what their effect would be on the different bodily systems. But it's always under the category of emaciation, coalescence, and trying to restore someone from a very, very, very depleted level. But then Ayurveda also does agree that you can get all of the nutrients you need, and it's better for your gut overall and your psyche overall to derive the nutrients that you can from plants. So that's and then some of that is mixed in with spiritual beliefs and all of that. So I see everything on a spectrum, and when I teach Ayurvedic cleansing or when I with someone one-on-one, we look at anywhere where you are and whatever your choices are without any judgment. And then we say, well, where do you want to be ideally? And then we look at movements towards healthier diet and lifestyle for your unique constitution. And then we look at the categories of cleansing that are most appropriate for you. So, and you do that for a period of time. And then you go back to your kind of baseline of what you choose based on your beliefs and what's right for your unique body, life circumstance choices in life. Okay, so let me check on If I left any open loops, please let me know. I just realized we're getting a little bit late in class, and I want to make sure I give just enough to digest for today, and then we can continue this beautiful conversation. I'll just make sure that I didn't miss anything um, essential from today's conversation. So we talked about the energetics of food and how different foods affect your moods, mind, and emotions. We talked about the colon nervous system connection and how your appetite affects emotions and the regulation of the nervous system, all of that. We talked about seasonal considerations to anxiety specifically. And we talked about there's no one size fits all approach to diet and cleansing. I think I got my main bullet points. So now we'll just check questions, and if there are any other open loops in your mind, let me know. And either that can be expanded on today, or you will just point me in the direction of our next topic of conversation and teaching. Sharon said spring fever. Exactly. When we were talking about that before. Exactly. And you said, I don't experience it in California as much, that we don't have a huge, there's not a dramatic change in seasons. I used to live in Southern California too. And then she said, in Maryland, where I lived as a child, you can count on feeling spring fever. Absolutely. Yeah. And I realized when I lived in Southern California, just the change in the amount of daylight, even though there wasn't as big of a fluctuation, right? Also, Harinam's in a climate that doesn't have huge fluctuation, right? So it's kind of, it's interesting to feel that. I felt that when I lived in Southern California, but I also noticed that the change in the daylight still created the feeling of change and the energy moving outward and inward, even though there wasn't as a dramatic change in temperature. So just something to consider and maybe self-reflect on, Sharon, as you notice. I also felt my pitta personally. I'm very pitta and vata pretty much equal. When I lived in Southern California, I started experiencing more pitta disorders. Even though it wasn't super hot all winter, it still got pretty cold, but it wasn't like cold enough. Like my system started getting irritated with the excess, like it didn't get cold enough in the winter. It's like my body, I also grew up in the Northeast. So it's like my body was also wanted more change and fluctuation. And so I felt so relieved, even though I don't like the cold in the winter. I live in the Pacific Northwest now in Oregon. And I feel relieved. Like when the summer ends and everything gets cold, it's like, okay, that pitta can leave. Actually, more energy tune within. So these are just some nuances to note for yourself and for anyone to note. There's subtle nuances seasonally and in the climate aspect for wherever you live that might be working great for your body, or that might be unknowingly irritate your body. Like even when I lived in Southern California, I had all these pitta disorders come up, and I got some blood work done, and they were like, oh, you have autoimmune markers. And I was like, what? And then I did a big pitta cleanse, and I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I have no problem with pitta anymore. So it's just like, it's important to know if we're living in a climate that's actually really agitating our doshas. Gloria asked, why is fermented food not desirable, including vinegar? That basically they're inflammatory foods. They're pitta aggravating foods. So we're very, very strict with that when someone has a pitta imbalance. So autoimmune, hyperacidity, inflammatory bowel disease, inflammatory migraines, anything that really falls under the category of pitta, rashes, rheumatism or rheumatoid arthritis, eczema, even these kinds of things. It's really important actually to not eat fermented foods, including vinegar, because they spike pitta and they aggravate these conditions. And they're really a lot of the information, out there has been supportive for people transitioning off of very conventional diets into more healthful mindedness of like lots of different foods and more traditional preparations of foods. And so, but then we have to refine from there and say, well, what are the energetics of those foods? What are the qualities of the foods? How do they impact me? What are some of the cultural connections that my body has from the places in the world that my ancestors grew up, and what are those implications in foods that work for me, right? Like there's so many other layers to that. And then we have to eventually we follow some structures and rules in Ayurveda to get things back on track and to reverse through the 6 stages of disease, which we talk about today. But if we're experiencing most diseases that are diagnosable are in stage 5 or 6. So anything diagnosable by a Western doctor is in stage 5 or 6 already on Ayurveda, sometimes stage 4. But Ayurveda teaches us stage 1, 2, and 3, so we can learn more subtle signs of preventing anything from getting that far down the path of manifestation. And then we learn how to reverse. So in that reversal, we learn more nuance and more refinement. And so and then we basically, the goal is to let go of the rules and regulations and lists and do's and don'ts, and come back to natural appetite and natural cravings. Because as we went on that tangent before, and I didn't get to circle back, that was one of my open loops, talking about cravings and the Agni, the true inclinations of Agni. Because in stage 4, 5, and 6 of the stages of disease, your imbalance is what's causing your cravings. So when you use the rules and the regulations and the structures to get back down to and stages 1, 2, and 3, and then once you're back in the early stages, you can hear your natural cravings again, and you can trust your body again, and you can restore your natural appetite again. And in that time, Gloria, most likely, or what I've seen with fermented foods, is that most people only crave them when they really have a gut microbiome imbalance or deficiency. Like right after they had antibiotics, it's great to have fermented foods, only for as long as you're craving them and not any longer, because otherwise it throws pitta out of balance. So not any longer. But what happens is learn about all these things and they say, oh, this is healthy. And some Western mentality is more is better. So then people end up eating a bowl of sauerkraut for their lunch. And we can't digest that. And it doesn't work its magic then. It's meant to be a condiment. Also, it was created out of necessity before we had refrigeration. So it's some of the only ways that certain cultures could preserve food and have any kind of sustenance or calories that brought them through the winter, for example. So we have to peer in a little bit more deeply to where some of the things that are touted as healthy now, for who and when. It's all based on Kala, Desh, and Patra, time, place, and circumstance. So all of Ayurveda, any question you ask me, I can say, depends. And most Ayurvedic practitioners will be like, well, it depends. What do you think about this? Well, it depends. It depends on time, place, circumstance, who we're talking about, for when, what their special circumstances and why. And so then you got to learn about all the things, and then you let go of everything you learned, and then you trust your body and you listen, and the body will point you in the right direction of what it needs. That was a long-winded answer for what do you think about fermented foods. Sharon asks, does this program happen every week? No, it doesn't happen every week. Second Wednesday of every month, we do this class live, which is centered more around Ayurvedic psychology. And then I have other pop-up classes. Now it's springtime, so I'm starting to come out of hibernation, And I have all kinds of things I want to teach you, which is why like every week I've been jumping in and teaching you something. But I go through seasons with that because I follow the natural rhythms. But this one, as like every last year, every single month, and for the last year and a half, every single month, we've done an Ayurvedic psychology class like this. And I intend to continue doing those, but there will also be other classes in between. Sharon said I could be a good polar bear, sleep in a cave all winter and eat fresh salmon. I wonder where your ancestors are from. And you could be happy with and be warm all the time. Snow's pretty to look at, but I don't like to be involved with it. That's a sweet reflection. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Pete asked, what do you do for gallstones? Currently taking a supplement that seems to be working to help with gallbladder, has apple cider vinegar. I'm doing the 30-day mung bean soup cleanse. Great. And that's going well. Seems to be helping Agni. I'm experiencing the kind of hunger you described. So part of me feels like what I'm doing is working. So I don't want to stop what I'm doing, but maybe there's a better way to deal with the gallstones. So if you are, so again, depends. I haven't worked with you individually one-on-one. So if working with a practitioner one-on-one to work with the gallstone, then that's great. And if it has apple cider vinegar and it's for a purpose, just see it all the way through. Better to see something all the way through that you started and like really devote yourself to that process. And then there are other Ayurvedic approaches as well with gallstones, but it's kind of outside the scope of the conversation for today. So I'll leave it at that, is allow your practitioner to work with you on that specifically. And if any of you, also Susie asked, these are kind of advanced questions that are outside the scope of today's conversation. So if anyone needs a one-on-one consultation, I'll give you my calendar link. I can do those on donation, or if you want to talk to me to talk about doing consistent work together, we could always schedule a call to just talk about your needs and see what you need. And if it's not me that I think is the best fit to work with you, I'll refer you to my mentor or to another practitioner that specializes in the thing that you need. So always happy to share that way. Okay. And then, yes, thank you, Sharon, for all that you shared. And you have looked into that, your ancestry background. So that's great. I'm glad you enjoyed the class. And yeah, well, I'll send out the recording. So anyone who hasn't registered for this class as a live class, I will give you the link that you can do that. I think if you're joined today, there's a good chance that you're already on the list. But I am going to be co-leading an Ayurvedic cleanse challenge coming up in a few weeks. I might change the date. It depends. But it's set to start on the 30th of this month, which is getting kind of soon. But the latest it will start will be the first week of April. But the next cleanse challenge will start, where we'll dive into all of this. Everything will be personalized. It's not just a group course, but my mentor, Vidya, Ayurvedic physician, and myself are going to be working with each person one-on-one and guide you for 15 days and beyond. But at least you'll get all the education of all the nuanced things that we talked about, that we started talking about in today's class. And then if anyone just wants personalized support, let me give you my link to my calendar for one-on-one. And here it is. And if you're watching this as a recording, it's linked below the video. Yeah. And thank you, Anna, for your sweet reflection. My pleasure. Patty, I'm so happy you were here. I'm glad you got some insights too. And so if there's no other questions, we'll close up today with a brief prayer. And then I'll be in touch via email with recordings and more teachings coming up soon. All right, loves. So praying that our conversation today has a ripple effect and benefits the highest and best good of all living entities on all planes of existence and beyond. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. That's up. Om Bhantare Namaha. Thank you. Lots of love to you all. Thank you for your kind words and reflections and for your engagement. Very sweet. Joe and Joanna, I'm so happy the two of you could make it. And yeah, good to see you. Hi, Linda. Hi, Susie. I'm so happy that it was supportive. All right, let's keep the conversation going. You're welcome. You're welcome, Pete. Thank you. And yeah, I know there's so much more I could share. That's my only sadness in departing, is that there's always more I wish I could share in the time allotted, but we can't eat everything all at once. We got to digest, right? If there's any take home message. So I hope you savor this conversation, and all glories to Ayurveda, and continue to let this steep in your consciousness as you reflect and listen and trust your body and the intelligence within and beyond your body. I'll see you all soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.